When my card was declined at the grocery checkout with a full cart of food, I called my husband thinking it was a glitch. Instead, he laughed and said, "I locked it. You're spending too much. And from now on, you ask me before you spend a single dime." My mother-in-law was on speaker in the background, adding, "It's time you learned your place in this family." I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I calmly left the groceries, walked out to my car, and drove straight to the main downtown bank branch. 2 hours later, as I sat in the executive branch manager's glass office signing the final transfer documents, my phone began vibrating nonstop against the desk. 55 missed calls. They thought they were cutting off my allowance. What they didn't know was that the entire family business and every single one of their accounts were built on my money. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 34 years old, and up until this afternoon, I believed my marriage was built on mutual respect. The cashier at the grocery store scanned my items with a polite smile, the total coming to just over $120. I casually tapped my credit card against the machine, waiting for the familiar beep. Instead, a harsh red screen flashed. Declined. Thinking it was a minor glitch with the network, I tried again. Declined. Feeling the eyes of the growing line behind me, I reached for my phone and called my husband, Mark. "Mark, hey," I whispered, keeping my voice low. "My card just got declined at the register. Did the bank flag something by mistake?" On the other end, Mark didn't sound surprised. He let out a low, arrogant chuckle. "No mistake, Emily. I locked it." I froze. "What do you mean you locked it?" "You've been spending too much lately," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Consider this a reality check. From now on, you ask me before you spend a single dime." Before I could process his words, a second voice came over the line. His mother, Evelyn, was on speakerphone beside him. "It's about time you learned your place in this family, Emily," she chimed in, sounding thoroughly pleased with herself. "Men manage the money. You just spend it." A cold stillness washed over me. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I quietly apologized to the cashier, left the full cart behind, and walked out to my car in silence. Sitting in the driver's seat of my car, staring at the steering wheel, the silence inside the vehicle felt deafening. For 8 years, I had quietly played the role of the supportive, soft-spoken wife. Mark ran a rapidly growing logistics company, and his mother, Evelyn, never missed an opportunity to remind everyone at Sunday dinners how brilliant her son was for building such a successful empire. They both genuinely believed that I was just a domestic passenger in Mark's high-flying life, a quiet woman who was lucky to be taken care of. What Mark and Evelyn conveniently forgot, or perhaps chose to ignore, was how that logistics company was born in the first place. When Mark's initial startup collapsed 6 years ago, leaving him drowning in debt and on the verge of bankruptcy, it wasn't his mother's high society connections that saved him. It was me. My father, a shrewd commercial real estate developer, had passed away years ago, leaving me a substantial estate held in a private trust. I was the sole trustee and beneficiary. Back then, out of deep love and complete trust, I injected over $1.5 million from my father's estate into Mark's struggling business. That capital injection bought the fleet, hired the key staff, and secured the initial warehouse contracts. But because I hated corporate politics, I stayed off the day-to-day payroll, letting Mark run the public operations while my trust remained the quiet, underlying financial backbone of the entire corporate structure. They thought my silence was ignorance. As I turned the key in the ignition and backed out of the parking lot, heading straight toward the city center, I realized it was time to give them a very loud reminder. The drive downtown took 20 minutes, but my mind was completely clear by the time I pulled into the underground parking structure of First National Bank. I took the elevator straight up to the private banking suite on the 9th floor. Mr. Vance, a sharp man in his 60s who had managed my late father's estate for over 2 decades, stood up immediately when his assistant ushered me into his glass-walled office. "Emily, what a pleasant surprise," he said, offering a warm handshake before noticing the tight line of my jaw. "Is everything all right?" "I need a complete review of all accounts connected to my father's trust and my personal line, Mr. Vance," I said, sitting down across from his heavy oak desk. "Right now." He adjusted his glasses, turning to his terminal. As his fingers flew across the keyboard, his pleasant expression slowly dissolved into a deep frown. "Emily, did you authorize a primary credit restriction on your joint personal account this morning?" he asked cautiously. "My husband locked my card from his phone," I replied, my voice steady. "And he told me I need his permission to spend money." Mr. Vance leaned back, a look of utter disbelief crossing his face. "Mark locked your card? On the primary liquidity line backed by your father's trust capital?" He pulled up another file on his screen. "What's more concerning is that 2 days ago, your husband submitted a request to reclassify the corporate credit limits, attempting to list himself as the sole guarantor on the business accounts backed by your trust assets." I felt a cold smile touch my lips. He really thought he had pulled it off, didn't he? "Show me the trust terms, Mr. Vance. What authority do I have right this second?" Mr. Vance turned the screen toward me, tapping a finger on the bold header of the Master Trust Agreement. "Under the explicit terms your father established, Emily, you retain 100% executive authority over all linked capital, guarantees, and subsidiary credit lines," he explained, his tone sharpening with professional focus. "Mark was granted secondary signatory privileges purely at your discretion as your spouse. He has zero independent ownership over the underlying assets." "Then I want those privileges revoked," I said evenly, "effective immediately." Mr. Vance didn't hesitate. He pulled out a stack of red flags and legal revocation forms that had been sitting in my file for years, waiting for a moment just like this. For the next 40 minutes, we went line by line through every single financial connection. I officially unlinked my father's trust from Mark's corporate bank accounts, withdrawing the $1.5 million liquidity guarantee that kept his logistics firm afloat. Next, I severed the joint personal accounts, sweeping my remaining balance into a newly opened private individual account in my name only. Finally, I targeted the high-limit corporate cards. Since the entire credit line for Mark's business was underwritten by my estate's assets, I instructed Mr. Vance to immediately freeze every single card issued under that master corporate account, including Mark's primary card, his operations director's card, and the supplementary card he had secretly handed to his mother last year. "All forms are signed and processed," Mr. Vance said, pressing the final button on his keyboard with a satisfying click. "The trust guarantee is officially pulled, and all associated corporate lines are frozen. As of right now, your husband's business has zero access to your capital." I sat back in the leather chair, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. Mark wanted to play games with access and control. Now he was about to learn what real control looked like. I was still sitting in the leather chair in Mr. Vance's office, taking a slow sip of water, when my phone vibrated on the desk. The screen lit up with Mark's name. I didn't answer. 2 seconds later, it buzzed again. Then a text message flashed across the screen. "Emily, answer your phone now. What is going on with my card?" I set the phone back down, face up, and watched the chaos unfold. Within 30 seconds, another call came through, this time from Evelyn. Then Mark again. Then 3 texts in a row. Why did my corporate card just get declined at the supplier office? Evelyn's card was declined at her country club lunch. She's humiliated. Emily, call me back right now. This isn't funny. The calls didn't stop. The phone vibrated continuously against the wooden desk, buzzing so hard it was nearly sliding off the edge. 55 missed calls in total, alongside dozens of frantically typed messages. Mr. Vance looked at the glowing screen, then up at me with a subtle, knowing smile. It seems the financial reality is setting in, Emily. Right at that moment, Mark was likely standing in front of his main fuel supplier, unable to authorize the afternoon delivery for his entire fleet of trucks. Evelyn was likely trapped at her high society luncheon, staring at a declined card with all her friends watching. They had tried to cut off my grocery money to put me in my place, completely oblivious to the fact that their entire lives were running on my engine. I waited until Mr. Vance handed me the printed, stamped confirmation documents of the account transfers. I placed them neatly inside my handbag, picked up my continuously ringing phone, and finally slid it into my pocket without answering. It was time to go home and face the noise. When I unlocked the front door and stepped into the house, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Mark was pacing back and forth across the hardwood floor, his face flushed red, while Evelyn sat stiffly on the sofa, her arms crossed tight against her chest, glaring at the door. The moment Mark saw me, he exploded. "Where the hell have you been?" he shouted, storming toward me. "My corporate card got rejected in front of our biggest logistics client. Evelyn was practically kicked out of her lunch club." "What did you do to our accounts, Emily?" I stood my ground near the entryway, setting my handbag down on the side table with deliberate calmness. I looked him dead in the eye, not flinching for a single second. "I didn't do anything unreasonable, Mark," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the room like steel. "You called me this morning and told me that I needed to ask you before spending a single dime of your money. So, I took your advice. I decided to stop spending any of my money on you." Mark stopped dead in his tracks, his jaw dropping as the color drained from his face. Evelyn stood up from the couch, her eyes wide with sudden panic. "Emily? What are you talking about?" I reached into my bag, pulled out the stamped transfer documents from the bank, along with the official legal separation papers Mr. Vance had prepared, and placed them on the dining table between us. Every account, every fleet line, and every corporate credit facility was underwritten by my father's trust, I explained smoothly. As of 2 hours ago, I have revoked all guarantees and severed my trust from your business. You wanted full control of your finances, Mark. Now you have it. Mark scrambled to grab the papers off the table, his hands trembling as he flipped through the bank seals and legal notices. The reality of what he had done finally crashed down on him. Without my trust's $1.5 million backing, his logistics firm was technically insolvent. Within days, payroll would bounce, his suppliers would freeze fuel lines, and his entire artificial empire would collapse under the weight of its own debt. "Emily, please," Mark stammered, stepping forward, his previous arrogance completely gone, replaced by pure desperation. "We can talk about this. I was just stressed this morning. I didn't mean it." Evelyn's proud posture completely crumbled. "Emily, child. We're family. You can't destroy Mark's life over a misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Evelyn," I said, picking up my suitcase that I had packed earlier that morning. "It was a revelation. You both showed me exactly how you view me when you think I have no power. Now, you get to see who I am when I take it back." I walked out the front door without looking back, leaving them standing in the quiet ruins of their greed. I moved into a sunlit high-rise condo overlooking the harbor, a place bought entirely in my own name, paid for by my own inheritance. For the first time in 8 years, I slept in total peace. Now, I'm curious about you who are watching my story. What would you have done if your spouse tried to lock you out of your own life? Would you have fought back immediately, or handled it silently like I did? Comment below and let me know where you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Thank you for watching.